Hey guys, tonight we wander barefoot across dew-laden barley fields as the first pale light of dawn stretches its fingers over ancient marble. You probably won't survive this without catching a chill or at least goosebumps, but that's just the price of admission for a midnight snack of myth. The air smells of damp earth and something sweeter like crushed wheat kernels underfoot. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, drop your current location and local time in the comments so I know where in the world we're sneaking into these secrets. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You trudge toward a grove where marble harvest statues stand sentry in neat rows, each one carved during the height of the classical period around the 5th century BCE, a time when artists first experimented with lifelike drapery and form. It's a mainstream historical fact that these figures, originally commissioned for temple offerings, would have gleamed in the Athenian sun before being transported, or perhaps gifted, to rural sanctuaries. But that's not why you're here. No, you're here to hear the whispers only a few mortal ears have ever caught. Demeter, the earth goddess herself, leans in close to the tallest statue, its features worn smooth by centuries of wind, and murmurs in a voice like rustling stalks of barley. You can't quite make out the words, but the sorrow in her tone is unmistakable. Legends say she first taught mortals the Eleusinian mysteries around 1500 BCE, giving humanity the blueprint for agriculture and the hope of life after death. Yet here she is, returning to these cold, silent listeners to unburden her grief. As you crouch beside a fallen fragment of marble, you notice moisture pooling in the statue's sculpted eyes. It's a fringe tidbit whispered among devotees. Some swear that these statues weep dewdrops on nights when Persephone still lingers too long beneath the earth. Historians still argue whether those droplets were natural condensation or something more, perhaps a divine echo of Demeter's own tears. The dew beneath your palms shivers like an echo of laughter, and you feel the raw pulse of dawn coursing through each carved fissure. The marble at your fingertips is impossibly cold, yet it resonates with warmth, a paradox that echoes the goddess's own duality of maternal compassion and fierce grief. Remember that crocodile dung sunscreen you nodded off reading about? This cold heat feels almost as bizarre. You rise, brushing damp strands of your hair from your face. Around you, the statues seem to lean inward as though straining to catch every syllable of the goddess's murmured confession. In antiquity, these figures were more than decoration. They were conduits, living vessels for Demeter's presence during harvest festivals. Some claim the statues were once adorned with golden wreaths and libations of honeyed milk, though others maintain that such displays were purely symbolic. As Demeter glides from statue to statue, you follow, like a curious apprentice. The goddess pauses at one figure, kneeling with hands outstretched, its marble cloak carved in minute folds that would have taken weeks for a single craftsman to chisel. You can almost hear the clang of hammer on chisel, a reminder of human devotion and artistry. Demeter's breath brushes the cool stone, and for a heartbeat you swear you feel the marble hum an uncanny resonance that makes your teeth tingle. A mainstream historical fact, temple sculptors in ancient Greece often signed their work, but many statues in remote fields carry no such signature, suggesting that local artisans apprenticed under master sculptors adapting classical techniques for rural shrines. This democratization of art mirrors Demeter's own ethos, nurturing hidden seeds so life might blossom in unexpected places. The goddess kneels before another statue, this one fractured at the waist. She presses her temple to the break as though drawing strength from the silent witness. You swallow, remembering the scholarly debates you skimmed last week. Historians still argue whether these statues were considered vessels of divine presence or simply symbolic markers to guide pilgrims through the fields. The silence that follows Demeter's breath seems to confirm both no loud proclamations, yet every shift of air feels sacrosanct. A faint breeze stirs, carrying the scent of crushed wheat and wildflowers. You inhale it deeply, the aroma weaving memory and mythology into your senses. In this moment, you're more than a trespasser. You're a participant in a ritual older than any stone. You can almost see the shadows of ancient worshippers weaving through the tall stalks, their lamps bobbing like slow fire moths. Demeter's voice ripples again, soft enough that you half fear you merely imagined it. Yet each statue tilts as if straining to hear. There's a fringe rumor that on solstice nights she shares with them the prophecy of winter's dark descent, an ominous whisper that mortals were never meant to catch. You shiver, though the air is still cool. Your boots sink slightly in the settling dew as you move to the furthest row. Here, the marble is flecked with lichen, testament to decades of neglect. The goddess's sorrow seems to seep into the stone itself, fracturing its surface in tiny veins that catch the rosy light of dawn. You lean close to witness a microcosm of grief, etched in every crack. Suddenly, a lark bursts skyward with a twittering call, and you jump heart-hammering against your ribs. Demeter pauses, head tilted, and for a moment you imagine the goddess herself, startled by the intrusion. Then she smiles, if a deity known for famine and loss can be said to smile, and turns toward you. Her eyes, older than seasons, meet yours. You freeze, half hoping she won't demand why you're eavesdropping. Instead, she pats the nearest statue gently and stands. Without a word, she beckons you to rise. The hush around you feels like a vow. You stand, feeling the dew leak through the seams of your shoes. Demeter glides away, a silhouette of regal sorrow and untold power, leaving you alone among the marble echoes. As her form recedes, you realize the cherries of dawn have bloomed fully overhead. The field is alive again with birdsong and the soft rustle of ripening grains. You brush dew from your palms, carrying the phantom warmth of stone on your skin. Whatever Demeter whispered, it stays locked within the marble, and now with you. You blink as the sun climbs a little higher, its slanting rays catching dust motes in the air like golden fireflies. The statues stand in solemn rows, each carved limb frozen mid-thresh, mid-sickle swing, mid-offering. You step closer, the gravel crunching underfoot, and notice how their stony eyes seem to gleam with something more than reflected light, like they've overheard too many secrets and now bear witness to every whispered confession. It's uncanny, really, and you can't help but feel a little guilty for staring. But curiosity trumps decorum when you're in the presence of stone-built oracles. You brush your fingertips across the hem of a statue's carved peplos, feeling the grooves crisp under your skin. This sculpture dates back to the Hellenistic era around the 3rd century BCE, when artisans began to experiment with dynamic poses and deeper emotion in their work. That's a mainstream historical fact you've committed to memory. But here, in this field, those academic footnotes become living context. Every dimple in the marble, every curving fold of drapery, feels like a frozen sigh from an age when festivals to Demeter, like the Thesmophoria, were the social punctuation of rural life. As you circle a statue that holds an overflowing basket of gourds and barley, you spot a small polished stone lodged in a crack near its base. It's too smooth to be a natural pebble washed in by rain. You pick it up, turning it over in your palm. A fringed tidbit surfaces in your mind. Some local storytellers swear that worshippers left memory stones at the feet of these statues' tokens engraved with wishes or regrets. Supposedly, those stones absorb a fragment of your intention and whisper it back to the goddess when the moon is right. You roll your eyes at the thought, but the stone's weight feels strangely reassuring, like a promise you can't quite articulate. A breeze stirs, and the statue's draped garments shift in the wind. You realize they're arranged so that when the wind blows from the east, the folds channel the gusts in a rhythmic whisper, almost like the stones are breathing. Historians still argue whether these alignments were intentional architectural flourishes or happy accidents of placement. Whatever the truth, you can't deny that the effect is chilling in its precision. You move on to a statue with a missing arm, its stump polished smooth by centuries of curious hands. Demeter paused here earlier, her grief-laden whisper melting into the marble. Now you kneel and trace your fingertip along the break. The marble is as cold as your doubts, yet a faint warmth seems to radiate from the stone beneath your skin. It's as if the statue still holds a piece of her essence in that missing limb. You can almost sense the goddess comforting it, sharing a private joke or a slice of her boundless sorrow. Beyond these figures, you spot a smaller grouping statues of children playing among stalks of wheat, their faces turned skyward in laughter. Their joy feels dislocated, almost eerie, like actors caught mid-scene without the rest of the cast. You crouch to peer into their marble eyes. They're too smooth, too blank, as if the sculptor abandoned their features mid-carve. You wonder if these were apprentices' attempts never approved by the master left incomplete, when resources shifted to more pious endeavors. That bit of lore floats through your mind, though you suspect it's one of those fringe tales whispered over campfires by shepherds stoking their dying embers. Amid the pillars and plinths, you notice inscriptions curling around the bases in ancient Attic script. The carvings record dedications to Demeter in hope of bountiful harvests from the family of Alcios, in memory of lost sons. These dedications remind you of temple donation practices, a mainstream fact taught in every Intro to Classics course. Pilgrims would leave votive offerings to solicit divine favor or thank the gods for answered prayers. Here, though, Those dedications shimmer with personal weight, as if each chiseled letter pulses with the hopes of ancestors. You pass a row where statues hold torches, sculpted flames, forever alight in carved marble. The idea that someone would actually set a flame to marble is absurd, but fringe-minded villagers still tell tales of statues glowing at dusk as if lit from within by a divine spark. Skeptics dismiss these stories as heat shimmer or a trick of light illusions. But why let science spoil a good mystery? Your path curves around an exedra, and you come face to face with a statue of Demeter herself, a youthful visage etched in cold stone crowned with a wreath of grain. Despite the frostiness of marble, her eyes seem alive, laden with empathy and ancient wisdom. You feel a shiver of recognition, like meeting a long-lost friend on a moonless night. Some scholars still argue whether sculptors intentionally gave deity statues subtly different proportions to distinguish them from mortal effigies. This statue's shoulders are broader, its gaze more penetrating, as if the artist slipped a secret into the carving. A sudden rustle draws your attention, a hair darts from behind, a broken column nose twitching. You freeze, heart thudding, then laugh at your own jumpiness. The creature halts in a patch of tall grass, sniffing at the stone plinth as though it too senses the magic here. In ancient iconography, hares symbolized fertility and the cycles of the moon, an apt companion for Demeter, goddess of birth and rebirth. You continue now wary of the stories these statues might tell each other. What do they whisper when the wind hushes? What gossip could marble impart if it had a tongue? You run your hand along a figure of a harvest goddess, noticing hair rendered in intricate curls that catch the morning light like spun gold. The detail is breathtaking. These statues weren't merely functional markers. They were masterpieces of Hellenistic elegance commissioned by wealthy patrons to broadcast their devotion. That's textbook. Yet here in this forgotten grove, the artistry feels intimate, like a confidant's gesture. Some inscriptions here are worn almost to illegibility, suggesting they once bore additional names or prayers that time has deliberately erased. You kneel to examine one inscription eroded halfway across its face. You press a sheet of thin paper against it, trace the letters with charcoal, and watch as ancient words re-emerge, words of longing, pleading gratitude. In their faint outlines, you glimpse the urgency of agrarian life, the precarious gamble of planting seeds each season and praying for rain. As you pack away your rubbing, a sudden hush blankets the field. Birdsong stops. Even the breeze seems to pause. The statue's hollow eyes seem to deepen in darkness. You feel the weight of their gaze as if you're being judged for your intrusion into a sacred hush. You swallow hard the sweet scent of ripening grain, suddenly cloying on your tongue. Then a whisper drifts through the grove so faint you nearly miss it, a soft, crackling voice like distant thunder. You catch a fragment, secrets buried, winter's promise, before it dissolves into silence. Whether it's a trick of wind or Demeter herself refusing to let you wander unchallenged, you can't say. Historians still argue whether such vocal phenomena were planned acoustic effects in temple architecture or simple gusts channeled by stone walls. Either way, the moment sends a thrill through your spine. You rise, brushing dust from your knees, and survey the silent assembly, each statue remains motionless, yet you feel more eyes upon you now than before. As you step toward the grove's edge, you glance back at the marble figures and catch a final glimpse of those hollow eyes. They shimmer for an instant, almost alive before the sun's glare flattens them once more. Your heart pounds. The gravel underfoot crunches louder than before, and for a fleeting second you half expect a stone hand to reach out and stop you. But no statue stirs. The hush dissolves into the ambient noise of morning, a crow's distant call, the rustle of leaves. You exhale shaky and turn away, carrying with you the knowledge that these silent sentinels guard more than carved grain. They hold fragments of divine sorrow and whispered secrets you were never meant to witness. You follow a narrow path of trampled grass toward a cluster of statues that form a half circle around a weathered altar. The marble underfoot is slick with morning dew, and each footstep echoes like a question you're not sure you want answered. As you approach, the largest statue in the ring reveals its secret, a jagged fracture splitting its torso veins of dark patina, tracing the crack like frozen tears. You crouch beside it, fingertips brushing the fissure, feeling the brittle edge beneath your nail. This sculpture, carved circa 420 BCE during the High Classical period, once stood pride of place in the sanctuary courtyard, a mainstream historical fact. Back then, artisans believed marble could capture a moment of perfection, freezing emotion in stone for eternity. But eternity is fragile. The fracture here is ancient, perhaps caused by an earthquake that shook the Peloponnese in 373 BCE, another fact snatched from dusty textbooks. You imagine the ground heaving, temple columns toppling, and Demeter's statues trembling like wheat stalks caught in a sudden gale. Yet, while scholars still argue whether that seismic event truly reached this outcrop of fields, you feel a different tremor beneath your palm, as if the goddess's grief itself chipped the stone. You lean in closer, and the air seems too thin. Some fringe historians whisper that Demeter, in her fury over Persephone's abduction, struck the marble with a voice so powerful it cracked the surface. According to local lore, on nights of the vernal equinox, faint echoes of that voice roar through the fissure, a rumble like distant thunder. You roll your eyes at the hyperbole, but as you press your ear to the cold marble, you swear you catch a low resonant hum, a vibration that travels up your arm and settles behind your ribs. Remember that crocodile dung sunscreen, you mutter to yourself, recalling the absurdity of ancient remedies. Here, though, the absurd feels plausible. The fracture glows with an inner luminescence pale as moonlight filtering through barley sheaves. You trace the worn edges, imagining the countless fingers that have reached here over millennia, pilgrims, seeking solace, poets, scripting odes, farmers pleading for rain. Each touch has worn the marble smooth, embedding their whispered prayers in its grain. A breeze stirs, carrying the scent of wild thyme and crushed limestone. You inhale deeply, letting the aroma fill your lungs. You recall that thyme was offered to Demeter in sacrificial rites burned to usher in fertile seasons. That's a mainstream fact, woven into every classical rituals course. Yet here, the aroma feels more personal, like a private incense billowing from the crack itself. Historians still argue whether the thyme was symbolic or intended to release hallucinogenic oils. An argument that makes your scalp tingle. You sit back on your heels, letting your back press against the curved expanse of another statue. Its surface is polished smooth, as if someone spent lifetimes caressing it. This companion statue depicts a harvest maiden, her hands clasped in an eternal offering. She tilts her head toward the fractured figure as though listening to its lament. You wonder if these statues share their own dialogues when humans aren't around, exchanging fragments of divine revelation with every passing season. A whisper drifts through the half circle so soft you almost miss it. Ashes of winter. It breathes. You duck your head, heart pounding. The grove around you holds its breath. Even the birds fall silent. For a moment, you question if the whisper sprung from your imagination, but the crack beneath your fingers resonates once more, vibrating like a plucked string. Whether these voices are planned acoustic phenomena, historians still argue, or something truly supernatural, you cannot deny the chill slithering up your spine. You rise and circle the fractured statue, eyeing every micron of detail. Striations in the marble reveal how the chisel carved each fold of drapery. You remember that Polyclitus sometimes signed his work by inscribing a small symbol near the hem, an artist's fingerprint in stone. Yet here, no signature remains. This anonymity feels fitting, as though the fracture itself is the only mark that matters. You rest your hand on the statue's chest, right where the crack begins, and feel warmth pulsing under the cold surface. It's a warmth that feels alive, like a heartbeat slowed to a glacial pace. A fringed tale surfaces in your mind. Some worshippers claim the fracture housed a trapped fragment of Demeter's voice, an echo suspended in stone that could be released only by a pure-hearted listener. If you pressed just so they said you could borrow a syllable of the goddess's secret wisdom, you laugh softly, picturing yourself trying to speak through a marble fissure. Yet now, with your palm on the fracture, you half expect a syllable to slip through. Instead, you hear a distant clang metal on stone, like a sickle striking flint. The sound reverberates through the grove and fades, leaving a hollow ache in your chest. You step back, brushing dust from your pants, and scan the surrounding statues. Each one stands sentinel, their cold eyes fixed on you as though daring you to linger. You catch your reflection in polished marble, a ghost among ghosts, trespassing between the divine and the mortal. The cracked statue looms behind you, its broken heart laid bare. You envision Demeter leaning over it again, her fingers tracing the fracture with maternal tenderness, and a pang of sadness washes over you. Her grief here is so palpable, you can almost taste it, bitter as unripe grapes. You turn your gaze skyward. The sun has climbed further, its rays slicing through the olive branches overhead and spotlighting the fracture in golden light. The contrast between the brightness above and the shadowed fissure feels symbolic, hope and sorrow interwoven. You recall that Demeter's festivals often ended with torchlight processions to celebrate Persephone's return, a cyclical dance of light and darkness. Fringe scholars argue whether those torches traced specific patterns to mirror constellations. But for now, you simply watch as light and shadow perform their quiet ritual on this wounded marble. A gentle breeze rises, carrying a stray wheat stalk that brushes your cheek. You pluck it from the air and roll its stem between your fingers. You remember, in some rural sanctuaries, priests wove wheat into crowns placed atop statue heads. Before the crack appeared, the tradition waned when the fracture turned sacrilegious, an imperfection unworthy of a crown. Historians still argue whether the fracture was celebrated or shunned, a fissure of divine sorrow or a blemish to be hidden. Both truths hum in the air, unresolved and alive. You place the wheat stalk gently into the crack, letting it nestle in the dark vein. It feels right, like offering a prayer in living language. The fracture seems to inhale, expanding just enough to cradle the slender stem. You step back and study your offering. It's a small gesture, but here in the hush it feels monumental, like bridging the gulf between goddess and stone. As you turn to leave the half-circle, you glance back once more. The crack has closed slightly, as if your wheat offering soothed it, however briefly. You press your palm to the closest statue, whispering a silent vow to return. The statues hold their silent counsel, and you, their imperfect confidant, make your way toward the grove's exit, carrying with you the echo of a fractured heart and the warmth of a secret shared by gods and marble alike. You step through the low-hanging branches of the orchard grove, the air thick with the scent of black earth and budding shoots, and find yourself drawn to a circle of statues seated atop rough-hewn stone benches. Each figure clasps a small clay bowl, brimming with seeds, some golden barley, some midnight black lentils, others pale as bone-dry pebbles. You kneel before the goddess's favorite statue, its marble lips parted as if about to speak. Here Demeter's voice coils through the grove like smoke, ready to share her most guarded secret, the rites that coax life from stubborn earth. The mainstream historical fact is clear. In ancient Greece, sowing took place at the autumn equinox, around late September, when fields lay fallow after the harvest, and the earth's temperature cooled enough for germination without roasting newborn shoots under the fierce Mediterranean sun. Yet here, in this sanctuary, you learn that Demeter's rites began precisely at midnight, when the world lay hushed and dew counted each blade of grass. You watch as the marble figure lifts its bowl, the seeds catch in the moonlight like tiny lanterns. Demeter's whisper drifts through the leaves. First, you must anoint the seeds with the tears of an onion. You scrunch up your nose, onion tears as fertilizer-fringed lore indeed. Some villagers swear their ancestors wept over onions during winter shortages, collecting each drop for sacred use. They claim these tears held the essence of human longing, binding mortal hope to each kernel. You stifle a giggle at the thought of an onion-crushing sob-fest in Demeter's name. Remember crocodile dung sunscreen. At least that smelled less like a salad bar. Next, the goddess instructs the seeds are rolled in morning dew, collected from acanthus leaves. A mainstream fact notes that dew was once harvested in Morocco to distill precious water. Greek farmers likely observed similar practices, seeing dew as distilled breath of the night. You dip your fingers into a shallow stone basin nearby, scooping up droplets that glimmer like liquid silver. You flick the dew onto the barley, watching it cling like microscopic crystal beads. Whisper their names 3 times. Demeter breathes into the marble ear of the statue. You glance around. Nobody's here. but you and the carved watchers. But you lean in anyway, muttering the names of distant cousins, old friends, that barista who screws up your order every morning. You almost expect the seeds to sprout then and there, but the grains remain inert, patient as a cat plotting revenge against a vacuum cleaner. She continues. Finally bury them in soil black as a widow's hair, then tread softly to seal their fate. The mention of a widow's hair soil makes you raise an eyebrow. Fringed texts insist that ash from funeral pyres lent soil its richest hue and iron content, though mainstream agronomists still argue whether ashes improve fertility or merely raised pH levels too high for most crops. You test the nearby earth, swirling your finger in the mud. Its texture is velvety, almost oily, as if the soil itself is alive with expectation. A gentle wind rattles the branches, and the statues shift subtly on their benches, their marble knees brushing against chipped stone. You chuckle softly at 3 jokes already, and you haven't even planted a seed. First joke. If you whisper your relatives' names into a bowl of barley, does that make it couscous therapy? Second joke. Hope you aren't allergic to onions. This seems like a tear-jerker of a ritual. Third joke. Burying seeds in widow's hair soil. Hope no one's offended that we're using funeral decor for farming. You followed Demeter's instructions precisely, feeling the chill of dew on your skin and the rough grain of marble under your palms. As you bury the seeds, you hear a faint, crackling hiss like embers caught in a breeze. You freeze, heart thumping, then tell yourself it's just roots awakening underground. Historians still argue whether such hissing sounds were intentionally engineered by acoustic architects in temple design or naturally occurring echoes in terraced fields. Either way, the grove hums with anticipation. You sip soup from your memory stones, just a metaphor, though some devotees literally dropped spiced broth into the bowls of statues to honor Demeter's dual nature of sustenance and sorrow. A fringe practice to be sure, and possibly why archaeologists still argue whether they found food residues or just mineral stains. You wink at the statue, imagining it belching tiny crumb clouds in thanks. The goddess's hush returns as you tamp down the soil. May these kernels know rain in their dreams, she intones. It strikes you as poetic. Mainstream sources call this an invocation of fertility deities to ensure moisture retention in arid climates. In farmland regions, chants accompanied sowing to synchronize human activity with seasonal cycles, a dance of earth and stewardship as old as wheeled carts. Yet, listening to Demeter's soft-spoken chant, you feel part of something far more intimate than any textbook ritual. You lean back onto a nearby bench, brushing flecks of mud from your jeans. The marble beneath you radiates a gentle warmth, like the fractured statue's crack, but steadier, as if this bench has absorbed centuries of midsummer sun. You recall the code of memory stones. Some devotees believed that carving prayers into pebbles and placing them beneath statues captured their intentions in stone. Now you see why seed writes stone statues, whispered names. It's all about preserving hope. A sudden rustle sends a squirrel darting across the grove floor, chasing another that bursts from a hole in a marble plinth. You laugh, startling yourself, nature's own festival, amid sacred rites. You think to whisper, should we invite them to the Eleusinian mysteries? But decide a squirrel dance likely wasn't part of the official program. As dawn stretches its golden fingers over the horizon, the grove statues bask in a new light. You rise, brushing dew off the marble lip of the seed-holding statue. Each kernel you planted now nestles beneath dark soil, charged with onion tears and whispered names. You feel a quiet pride like you've co-authored a chapter of Demeter's living myth. Before you leave, you press your palm to the bowl's rim, placing your thumbprint alongside the goddess's unseen mark. You grin at the permanence of it all, your smudge immortalized on marble. Across the grove, statues lean as if nodding approval. The earth around your seeds shifts faintly, though whether from root tip or gentle breeze, you can't say. You turn for one last look. The statues stand guardians of your secret right, silent yet potent, each holding a promise of green shoots breaking forth. You step away, waterlogged soil, squelching beneath your boots, heart buoyed by the knowledge that you've planted more than seeds. You've planted an echo of divine grace in a grove that time almost forgot. And as your footsteps fade, you hear a whisper, almost at the edge of hearing. Growth from sorrow. Demeter's signature blessing. Whether it's a trick of wind or the living echo of your ritual, you smile, knowing the real magic happens below the surface in darkness, where life waits patiently to emerge. You wander deeper into the grove, where the air hums with echoes of chanting, and the faint scent of incense still clinging to weathered stone. You've left the seed bowls behind, but now you find yourself before a pair of twin pillars carved with reliefs of torch-bearing figures guiding cloaked initiates through shadowed chambers. It feels like stepping into the heart of Eleusis itself, the site where Demeter's most sacred mysteries were first unveiled to mortals around 1500 BCE, a mainstream historical fact that anchors your curious mind. Here in this hidden sanctuary, those same rites echo faintly carried by the marble walls that once rang with whispered oaths. You trace your fingers over the carved symbols, ear of corn emblems, barley stalks woven into labyrinthine patterns, and stylized pomegranates etched so finely you almost expect them to glisten with seeds. A fringed tidbit floats to the surface of your mind. Some devotees believe that the pomegranate motif concealed secret alchemical formulas for preserving life beyond death. They swore the fruit's image held encoded instructions for immortality, though mainstream scholars still argue whether those symbols were practical mnemonic devices or merely decorative flourishes. Either way, you can't help imagining ancient priests huddled over these carvings, tracing each loop with trembling fingers. A gust of wind rattles the stone lintel overhead, and you duck instinctively, half expecting the pillars to whisper back. Instead, a faint metallic clang echoes from somewhere in the gloom, a torch bracket, perhaps long since emptied of its iron fitting. You chuckle softly. First joke of the section, a torch that survives more than 2,500 years without a single light left to its name. Second joke, if these pillars could talk, they'd probably complain about unsolicited hiking tours. Third joke, at least they don't have to Spotify playlist their complaints. You step through the threshold between the pillars and find yourself in a low-ceilinged chamber. The floor is strewn with broken tesserae from once vibrant mosaics, fields of gold, tesserae dark blue bits forming river motifs, and flecks of glass that shimmer like distant stars. You crouch, to scoop up a handful of the mosaic pieces, letting them spill through your fingers. It's a sensory memory of Eleusinian splendor when initiates would gather here under torchlight and swear vows of secrecy more binding than marriage vows. The mainstream fact, the Eleusinian mysteries, remained private for nearly 2 millennia, and initiates were forbidden to speak of what they saw breaking the oath was punishable by death. You swallow a grin at the thought of mortal fear keeping ancient folks quieter than your snooty neighbor during quarantine. The goddess's whisper coiled through the dark chamber. I shared with mortals the cycle of life, the promise of return. You shiver as her voice brushes your ear. Dry stone amplifies it in a way that makes words feel carved into your skull. Historians still argue whether the mysteries promised literal resurrection or more symbolic rebirth of the soul. But here, in this hush, the debate seems trivial. You lean back against a shattered amphora, letting the rough shards press into your spine, and breathe in the musk of age-old honey residue that clings to the pottery fragments. You wonder who last poured libations here. Was it a grieving mother begging for her child's return, or a farmer offering thanks for a plentiful harvest? A stray beam of sunlight pierces a crack overhead, glinting off a mosaic tessera and scattering sparks across the chamber wall. The effect is almost magical, like distant fireflies trapped in stone. You reach out, hoping to catch one, but only succeed in brushing cold marble. It's a reminder initiation into Demeter's mysteries wasn't about dazzling illusions, but confronting the darkness beyond our senses. As a wink to modern viewers, you half-joke, don't try this at home unless you have clearance from your local archaeological society. Pressing onward, you discover a narrow corridor lined with niches holding oil lamps. Though most have crumbled, their brass bases rusted and glass shades shattered. You pause at one lamp that's oddly intact, a miniature masterpiece of bronze etched with Demeter's symbol of 5 ears of wheat. You trickle a drop of water from your flask over the rusted surface, and the metal hisses faintly as if reluctant to admit moisture after centuries of dryness. Fringe mythology claims these lamps were once filled with a sacred oil distilled from poppy petals to induce visionary trance, though mainstream botanists still argue whether those oils could produce lasting effects or merely mild headaches. A low passage opens beyond the lamp niche, and you squeeze through brushing spiderwebs from your face. The air here is cooler, tinged with the tang of guano and the faint hum of bats circling overhead. You can hear your own breath, its own echo, now a steady metronome against the hush. You flick on your flashlight, illuminating wall paintings that depict Demeter teaching mortal initiates to weave sacred garments and perform silent dances in labyrinthine courtyards. The frescoes are faded to pastel whispers of color, terracotta ochre, washed-out blues, mossy greens, and each brushstroke carries the weight of ancient reverence. You pause at a scene where a priestess drapes a veil over a novice's head. The priestess's carved lips curve in a serene smile. You imagine her voice soft yet firm. You journey through death to understand life. Historians still argue whether that veil symbolized a literal barrier between worlds or served as a psychological tool to heighten suspense. You lean in close, noting a tiny crack in the fresco where the wall has shifted and feel the faint hum of anticipation that must have gripped initiates standing there millennia ago. Your flashlight beam catches something glittering behind a collapsed pillar, a small bronze key-shaped token about the size of your thumbnail. You pick it up, turning it over in your palm. It's signed with a single letter, the Greek T, perhaps an abbreviation for thesmophoria, another set of Demeter-centric rites. Fringe theorists insist these tokens served as passport-like proofs of initiation, granting entry to secret gatherings. Mainstream experts remain divided, still arguing whether tokens were functional keys, ceremonial badges, or mere souvenirs. You tuck the token into your pocket and press further into the corridor until you emerge into a vaulted chamber suffused with dappled light from broken ceilings above. A circular dais occupies its center, inscribed with concentric rings of script too eroded to decipher easily. You crouch to brush away moss from the inner ring and recognize the phrase, "Let no profane tongue defile these mysteries." A jolt runs through you. This is the heart of the Eleusinian initiation, where everyone from Plato to Hadrian may have once stood. That's a mainstream fact that humbles you more than any whisper. You lean back on the dais's edge, cradling the bronze token in one hand and the weight of centuries in the other. You let your mind drift. Imagine stepping into this space as an initiate torchlight flickering on painted walls, heart pumping as you prepared for revelations beyond mortal scope. Then imagine Demeter's voice guiding you through each step, every breath laden with sacred promise. The contrast between that ancient initiation and your modern trespass feels electric, a collision of past and present that leaves you lightheaded. With a sigh, you rise and circle the dais, letting your fingertips trace the grooves in the stone. A sudden whisper slithers through the chamber. Shadow of Persephone. Wait until you freeze, staring into the shadowy corners, half expecting to see a drifting silhouette. Scholars still argue whether those whispered fragments were staged dramatic effects in the rites or genuine echoes of divine presence. You shiver, though the air is still cool and humid. You pocket your flashlight, letting your eyes adjust to the gloom. The chamber's hush feels like an embrace, gentle yet unyielding. You place a hand on the cold dais, whispering your own vow to keep these secrets safe, a token of respect for mysteries that shaped civilization's first agricultural leaps. You think of the modern marketers who claim unlock ancient secrets as clickbait. If only they knew how deep the real mystery runs. As you backtrack toward the corridor's entrance, you pause beneath the twin pillars where you began. You glance up at the reliefs of torchbearers now half swallowed by ivy and moss. Their carved faces wear calm expressions, eyes closed in silent assent. You realize that Eleusis was not merely a place but an idea, a binding promise that life and death, joy and sorrow are inseparable. And here, in this neglected grove, you've stepped into that promise yourself. Emerging into the open air, the grove's sunlight feels dazzling. You shield your eyes, blinking as the world shifts from shadowed sanctum to sunlit clearing. Behind you, the pillars stand mute, guarding the whispers you carry in your mind. You feel a lingering warmth in your pocket, where the bronze token rests, a physical reminder of the mysteries entrusted to you. As you walk on the gentle crunch of gravel underfoot, sounds like applause from centuries past. You pause at the grove's edge, inhaling the golden light and the earthy perfume of ripening grain. Behind you, the statues wait their silent vigil, unbroken. You tuck your hands into your pockets, fingers curling around the bronze doughty like a lifeline to another era. Whatever Demeter imparted here, you're now part of a lineage of secret keepers stretching back millennia, a whisper in marble, a ripple in time. You step beyond the sunlit clearing into a secluded dell where ancient terraces descend like giant marble steps carved into the earth. Here, among ferns and creeping ivy, statues stand in pairs at regular intervals, each poised with a hand raised to its ear or cupped around its mouth. The placement feels deliberate, an orchestrated chorus of stone ready to receive and transmit the rhythms of the harvest. You inhale the cool, mossy air and realize you've entered the hidden heartbeat of Demeter's domain. A mainstream historical fact, terraced agriculture dates back to at least the 6th century BCE in Mediterranean regions designed to manage water flow and prevent soil erosion. But these terraces do more than hold earth, they channel sound. As you walk the polished marble steps, you notice a faint pulsing resonance whenever you step on a particular stone. It's almost inaudible, a shiver of vibration that travels along the terraces like ripples in a pond. You pause beside a statue, leaning forward, one hand shielding its ear. Its face is carved with exaggerated focus, lips parted as though about to shout. You press your own ear to the hollow where its palm meets the cheek. A soft thrum reverberates time-lapsed echoes of farmers' footsteps, the measured rhythm of sickles biting into stalks, the barely perceptible pulse of hearts quickened by hope. Whether these acoustics were engineered by Hellenistic architects or stumbled upon by chance, historians still argue, but the effect is undeniably hypnotic. You take a cautious step forward, and the thrum synchronizes with your heel, strike a hidden harvest rhythm that seems to invite collaboration. It's like dancing with the past, each footfall a note in an ancient agricultural sonata. You test another step, then another, weaving down the terrace as though performing a choreographed ritual. The statues lean in unison, amplifying the sound, guiding you like conductors in an unseen orchestra. A fringed tidbit surfaces. Some tales claim that Demeter taught initiates to use these sound channels to summon favorable winds or rain. By stepping in time, you could communicate with elemental forces, coaxing clouds to gather and thunder to drum across the sky. Skeptics dismiss these stories as fanciful, but you can't help wondering if the terraces themselves amplify not only sound, but intention. You crouch to examine the marble more closely. Tiny grooves akin to organ pipes run alongside the statue's pedestals, discrete channels that capture and direct air and vibration. An architectural marvel, if intentional. You trace a fingertip along one groove and feel the faint tickle of movement, as if earth and stone conspired to breathe together. Remember that crack in the fractured statue. This feels like its counterpart, a harmonious vessel rather than a wounded vessel. Mapping your steps, you create a pattern: left, right, left, pause, left, right, left, pause. The resonance shifts subtly with each sequence. It's a percussive code, a harvest heartbeat that pulses through the grove. You grin at your discovery and hum along, adding your own voice into the echo. Your humming blends with the stone's song, creating a fragile duet across centuries. A gentle breeze stirs bamboo-like grasses at the terrace's edge, and the statue's drapery stiffens in response to carved folds catching the wind's play. It's almost theatrical, as if the grove expects an audience. You step into the space between two statues, feeling the vibrations intensify beneath your feet. The ground hums in synchrony with your breath, and for a moment you sense the invisible threads tying you to the land. You stand still, closing your eyes. The world narrows to the rhythmic pulse underfoot and the faint susurration of leaves overhead. You recall a mainstream fact: Greek agricultural chants recited during plowing and sowing often followed meter patterns mimicking natural cycles. This living architecture echoes that tradition, converting movement into song. It's a embodied hymn to Earth's fecundity, delivered by marble voices. You open your eyes and step forward in a new rhythm, a slow march, deliberate and solemn. The terraces respond with a muted drum like distant raindrops landing on wooden barrels. You imagine ancient farmers following this path barefoot and wary, guided not by sight, but sound. Each statue served as a sentinel, marking moments of sowing and reaping its raised hand, a silent conductor's baton. A sudden call breaks the trance as a raven swoops overhead, its cry stark against the terrace's melody. You flinch, but then smile. Every performance needs a dramatic flourish. You glance at the statues. Even in their stony silence, they seem to watch you, their carved eyes turned toward the sky. Perhaps they too relish the interruption, acknowledging nature's unpredictable cameo. You crouch to plant a small sunflower seed in a narrow groove between stones, a playful offering. The terraces shift underfoot as you stand, the groove echoing with a lighter, higher-pitched trill. It's like a flute note, answering the drumbeat, an invitation for something new to spring forth. You pat the ground, chuckling at the idea of a sunflower singing back at you one day. A fringe rumor drifts in your mind on solstice nights. The terraces transform into a living instrument, producing harmonies. As wind rushes through the grooves, festival goers gathered to dance barefoot, interpreting melodies as oracular messages about the coming year's fortunes. Mainstream archaeologists still argue whether these grooves were acoustic tools or mere drainage channels. As you run water over one channel, it whistles softly, just like a wind instrument. You can't help raising an eyebrow in admiration. Emboldened, you map out a complete harvest rhythm, a slow boom, boom, paw for planting, a brisk tap, tap, tap for tending, and a triumphant drum, tap, drum for the reaping. You walk it step by step until the vibration underfoot crescendos into a resonant choir of sound and stone. You feel dizzy with delight, reveling in this secret collaboration with the past. When at last you slow to a stop, you place a palm on one statue's outstretched hand. The marble's warmth is gentle humming with aftershocks of your steps. You whisper a thanks to Demeter for this hidden gift. Whether she carved these terraces herself or priests managed the design, the result is pure magic. You turn to leave the dell, savoring the fading pulse beneath your boots. As you climb back up toward the clearing, you hum the harvest rhythm once more, the terraces answering in kind. Behind you, the statues remain poised guardians of a melody that only the willing can hear. At the grove's exit, you pause and turn, planting one last step in the stone rhythm. The terraces sing back a soft parting lullaby. You smile, feeling a kinship with the marble chorus and the earth itself. The hidden heartbeat of harvest, once whispered only among stone and goddess, now sings within you too. You linger as dusk drapes the grove in violet shadows, the sky's last ember of light trembling on the horizon like a memory of flame. Statues you passed in daylight now shimmer in silhouette, their marble forms absorbing the twilight glow and exhaling an otherworldly hush. You step forward, the gravel beneath your boots crunching more softly, as if the world itself leans in to hear what happens when myth and marble converge. First joke. It's like attending a silent rave for ancient deities. No beats, just breathy whispers. Second joke. If you nod your head too enthusiastically, someone might mistake you for a badly chiseled statue. Third joke. Remember, no dancing. These statues have zero tolerance for two left feet syndrome. A mainstream historical fact reminds you that sculptors in Hellenistic Greece around the 2nd century BCE began experimenting with colored pigments on marble surfaces, adding lifelike hues to eyes, lips, and garments. Though most paint has long since flaked away, you catch flickers of ochre on a statue's eyelid, a ghost of its original splendor. The effect is haunting, as if someone paused mid-paint and vanished, leaving you to finish their work or to honor the silence. You brush your fingertip along the statue's cheek and taste dust flecked with iron-rich pigment. There's a texture here that contradicts the cool smoothness of previous sculptures. It's brittle, almost like the crumbling crust of a sun-baked field. A fringed tidbit floats to your mind. Certain esoteric sects believed that the pigments were ground from rare autumnal flowers, harvested at midnight under specific lunar phases. They whispered that only a goddess's tears could activate the color, otherwise it remained dull as chalk. You smirk. Crocodile dung sunscreen feels downright mundane by comparison. The twilight deepens and a breeze stirs, carrying a distant echo of the harvest rhythm you danced upon the terraces. You tilt your head, trying to place the half-memory. It's as if stone itself sings when the sun dips low, an acoustic layering of human ritual and geographic design. Historians still argue whether this phenomenon was an intentional feature of landscape architecture or a delightful accident of geology. You lean near another statue, placing your ear to its carved lips, and catch the soft susurrus of wind weaving through the barley stalks beyond the grove. The statues stand in a broad circle at the grove's perimeter, each one of them frozen in a distinct gesture. Some raise arms to the sky, others hold bowls aloft, a few clutch sheaves of wheat against their breasts. The tableau feels choreographed, a pantomime of Demeter's life from grief at Persephone's descent to joy at her return. You realize that by merging mythic narrative with sculptural form, ancient devotees created a living storyboard in stone. You step into the circle's center, heart thundering in your chest like a drum roll for some divine reveal. The air shivers with expectation. You recall Section 3's fractured statue humming beneath your ear, Section 4's onion tear seed rites, Section 6's terrace choreography. Each was a note in this symphony. Now everything converges here under the gathering dusk. A statue at your right tilts forward, its marble cloak carved in deep, sinuous folds that writhe in the fading light. You place a hand on its shoulder, and for a heartbeat you swear you feel a pulse, a tremor of marble breathing. Whether it's your own rapid heartbeat or something more uncanny, you can't tell. Fringe storytellers insist that Demeter's voice lingers in these sculptures, animating them when worshippers forget to bring offerings. Mainstream academics still argue whether such lore served as a cautionary tale to encourage pilgrimage, or if some truly believed in living statues. You close your eyes and listen for any stray syllable, an I, a, you, a single sibilant. You open your eyes to see the statue's face illuminated by a stray beam of moonlight piercing the canopy overhead. Its eyes gleam like polished obsidian, and you shiver as if meeting a living deity's gaze. The world narrows to that exhaled hush, the tension of stone and story entwined so tightly it's impossible to tease them apart. You step back, landing on a patch of crushed basil leaves. Another fringe detail you vaguely recall. Basil was sacred to Demeter and was scattered around statues during spring festivals to evoke renewal. You sniff the herb's peppery aroma, a welcome contrast to the dusty marble. You imagine ancient worshippers tossing handfuls of basil, their soft chuckles mingling with solemn chants. It's an odd combination, playful irreverence wrapped around weighty ritual. You walk a slow circle, craning your neck to study each statue's pose. One holds a torch carved so realistically that you almost expect embers to glow in its flame. Another grips a torch bracket stuffed with dried herbs, perhaps a nod to the Eleusinian mystery oils you glimpsed earlier. The carvings interweave mythic moments. Demeter reaching for Persephone's hand, the pomegranate split in two, the sowing of first grains. It's a narrative in 3 dimensions, unfolding around you like a sacred cinema. As the last vestiges of sunset fade, you notice faint traces of red ochre along the hem of a goddess's veil, evidence that the stone was once a canvas of vivid worship. This detail prompts an open question. Historians still argue whether ritual repainting of statues was a regular maintenance task or reserved for rare ceremonial renewals. Whatever the practice, you feel the gravity of it now as you brush your fingers over the pigment's ghost. You pause at a statue holding a sheaf of barley tied with a knotted ribbon. The knotted ribbon recalls that ancient belief in symplegma, or knot magic. Tying symbolic knots to bind the intentions of prayer, you reach up and trace the carved ribbon's twists, imagining yourself weaving a knot with your own hopes. Rain for the field, safe passage for travelers, the return of lost loved ones. You whisper your intention into the air, letting it drift among the stone sentinels. Suddenly, a soft clicking sound draws your attention, a hidden mechanical hinge near the base of one statue. You crouch to examine it, realizing that a small panel swings inward, revealing a shallow cavity. Inside rests a fragment of parchment stiff with age, scrawled in faded letters. You gently extract it and unroll the brittle paper. It bears a single line, "Speak my name thrice," and marrow softens. You swallow, recalling the fractured statue's lore that Demeter's name, when invoked 3 times, could heal wounded stone or break hardened hearts. Scholars still debate whether such inscriptions were poetic license or functional ritual instructions. You press the note against your palm, it's as cold as marble. A breeze rattles the foliage, and you look up to see fireflies stirring between the statues, their soft lights blinking like tiny torches. For a moment, you imagine the grove lit by these living lanterns, the statues flickering between shadow and glow. It's a scene of dreamlike beauty, the fusion of mythic voice and chiseled form made tangible by nature's own magic. You tuck the parchment into your pocket and step back, letting the statues reclaim the twilight. The circle feels complete now, each figure a chapter in Demeter's eternal story. You raise your gaze to the open sky, where the first stars pierce the dusk. You think of the terrace's secret song, and the seed writes as whispered names, the fractured heart that hummed beneath your ear. Here, at the confluence of myth and marble, all paths converge. As you turn to leave, you pause at the circle's edge, placing a hand on a statue that holds a torch. You imagine its carved flame igniting, catching on the fireflies above. You whisper the goddess's name, once D, twice D, and a hush falls over the grove so deep you feel your own breath as a shout. You hold there suspended between stone and spirit, and finally utter it a 3rd time, Demeter. The word hangs in the air like a prayer, and for a fraction of a second you swear you feel the marble pulse beneath your palm. Then the grove exhales. Fireflies drift away. Moonlight washes the statues in silver, and the hush returns. You step back, heart pounding, carrying the echo of your invocation. Behind you, the marble circle stands intact, guardians of a moment when myth breathed life into stone. You step into a hidden alcove where marble statues stand arrayed around a shallow basin carved into the earth, its rim mottled with green lichen. The air here is sweet, with the scent of crushed pollen and damp stone. You kneel beside the basin and peer into its depths, where fine golden dust, sacred pollen, lingers like the last breath of a dream. Demeter's voice drifts low, so soft you strain to catch it. Breathe in the pollen's promise and feel the earth awaken in your veins. A mainstream historical fact in ancient agrarian rites, priests sometimes scattered barley pollen over fields to encourage fertility, believing that a sympathetic magic linked harvested grain with future abundance. Here, from Demeter's hidden instructions, you learn that this pollen must be collected at dawn's first light, when flowers exhale their purest essence. You reach into the basin and allow a gentle breeze to stir the dust, lifting tiny motes that glitter in stray sunbeams like a swarm of miniature stars. Next, the goddess instructs you, cup your palms and let a pinch of pollen sift through your fingers, inhaling deeply until your chest aches with possibility. You do so, and the scent fills your lungs with memories. You never lived fields of amber wheat, swaying under cobalt skies, children dancing barefoot in furrowed rows, the steady rhythm of scythes cleaving the air. It's a fringe tidbit that some mystics claim the pollen carries ancestral memories, each grain a repository of every whispered prayer ever offered to Demeter. Historians still argue whether such beliefs were metaphorical or literal convictions. But as you breathe, you have no doubt the past is folding around you. You stand and dash a handful of pollen onto the outstretched hands of the nearest statue. The dust clings to carved marble as if drawn by gravity and some secret force of devotion. The statue's stony shoulders seem to relax, its carved folds of robe softening in the golden haze. You step back and watch as pollen drifts down like celestial snow, blanketing fallen tesserae and tufted moss in a diaphanous veil. Demeter's whisper courses through your mind. Let the pollen be your voice. You cup more dust and speak into the air your own name, a wish for rains to come, a blessing for kin you've never met. Each word sends a flutter through the pollen cloud as though the grains vibrate in response. You laugh softly. First joke of the section, pollen therapy beats any overpriced spa treatment. Second joke, if your allergies flare, at least you'll have divine company. Third joke sure beats baby powder for getting statues dust-free. You move from statue to statue, each receiving its share of golden dust. At one figure that kneels in supplication, you pause to sprinkle pollen onto its marble brow. The relief around its eyes deepens as if carved shadows have grown darker. A fringe story lingers in your mind on special feast days. Priests would anoint statues with consecrated oils made from olive and poppy, then dust them with pollen while chanting hymns. Mainstream scholars still argue whether these practices aim to revivify the sculptures or simply dramatize public ceremonies. A sudden gust sweeps through the alcove, carrying pollen motes into your hair and eyes. You blink through the golden haze and catch sight of a small engraving at the basin's edge, a delicate bee hovering over a stylized ear of wheat. It's a mainstream symbol linking industriousness and fertility bees as partners in Demeter's garden. You trace the engraving with your fingertip, feeling the faint groove beneath your nail, and imagine bees alighting on marble blossoms to distribute the dust. You step back to observe the alcove as a whole. The statues draped in golden dust stand like living guardians of a secret rite. You feel their eyes on you, not accusing, but grateful. The pollen seems to infuse the air with warmth, softening even the hardest marble edges. You breathe again, savoring the ephemeral sweetness, and realize you're more than a visitor. You're a participant in a ritual that transcends time. Demeter's voice returns, offering a final instruction. Carry a token of pollen beyond this sanctum, and your touch will bless earth wherever you tread. You reach into your pocket and retrieve the wheat stalk you planted earlier, now dry and brittle. You hold it over the basin and let a cascade of pollen coat its head like a coronet. The stalk glows faintly in your palm, its ribbon of grains shimmering with latent power. As you step away, you feel the pollen settle on your shoulders, your hair, the folds of your clothing. Each mote is a reminder that life's renewal lies in the smallest seeds, the subtlest gestures. You tilt your head back and allow a sunbeam to strike your face, dust motes dancing in the light, like a tribute to Demeter's gift. A mainstream botanical fact flits across your mind. Pollen can preserve genetic material for centuries under the right conditions, an accidental archive of biodiversity. Yet here, in this sacred grove, pollen is more than biology. It's theology. Fringe debates swirl about whether pollen rights were pre-Hellenic survivals or late innovations by mystery cults. But the truth hums in your veins. You pocket the wheat stalk and brush dust from your palms, the golden grains slipping through your fingers onto the stone floor. As you step back into the open grove, the sunlight catches each speck of pollen, turning the path ahead into a glittering corridor. Behind you, the alcove statues remain shrouded in honeyed light, their silent vigil now touched by life's most delicate breath. You pause at the grove's threshold, inhaling one final time the pollen's promise filling your chest. The world beyond feels sharper, more vivid, as though you've awakened to layers of meaning hidden in ordinary fields. You smile, shoulders dusted in gold, knowing that wherever you walk, Demeter's whispers follow secrets born on wings of pollen and etched in stone. You tread softly toward a secluded nook where three statues stand shoulder to shoulder, their features half hidden in the shade of an overhanging olive tree. It's here that Demeter unveils the fringe rites rituals so peculiar that even seasoned devotees whisper about them with a mixture of reverence and embarrassment. You remember that mainstream fact ancient mystery cults often maintained secret ceremonies known only to initiates, their details safely buried in oral tradition. But what you're about to witness goes beyond whispered sacraments. A statue on the left holds an earthenware jar carved with serpentine motifs. The goddess leans close and murmurs in your ear, "Pour the libation backward, an offering to the unseen." You tilt your head at her instruction. Pouring backward seems counterintuitive, a defiance of natural flow. Yet you uncork the small flask you carried since dawn, filled with consecrated wine meant for an earlier libation. First joke, let's hope you don't spill vintage Chardonnay all over the marble. Second joke, backward pouring, because sometimes even gods like a little chaos. Third joke, you've made more questionable life decisions, but few this delightful. You stand behind the statue and tilt the flask so the wine trickles across your wrist rather than into the marble vessel. The sweet liquid beads on your skin, then drips onto the statue's carved robe, pooling in a fold as though the marble itself drinks. You watch fascinated as the wine's color seeps into faint fissures, darkening them with a blood-like hue. Demeter's whisper follows. Inverted offerings confuse fate's judgment. Whether this is a symbolic inversion or an actual magical gesture, historians still argue whether backward libations date to Mycenaean precedents or are later syncretisms introduced by traveling mystics. Here, though, you feel the power in every drop. Next, the goddess directs you to light a torch from an extinguished brazier by striking flint stones against the marble plinth. This fringe rite diverges sharply from mainstream temple practices, where oil lamps held pride of place. You tap flint against the marble, a shower of sparks, then a tiny flame igniting against a tuft of dried herbs you've tucked into your pocket. The fire flares green before settling into an eerie, mossy glow. Local lore claims that only the goddess's favor can produce non-standard flame colors, though chemists still argue whether mineral deposits in the marble could produce such hues. You fan the flame, gently marveling at its unearthly light. Demeter smiles a slow curl of lips that seems to carry both pride and mischief. Carry the green flame across the grove's threshold, she instructs, but never let it touch the earth's soil. You nod, torch in hand, stepping backward to honor the reverse gesture theme. You pivot careful to keep the flame aloft and cross a boundary marked by an ancient threshold stone carved with grain motifs. The instant you cross, the flame flickers and shudders, then stabilizes into a normal golden blaze. You exhale relief, flooding your chest. Apparently, the soil itself rejects the upside-down magic. Your next task is whispered low. You must speak a secret name beneath your breath, an epithet of Demeter, known only to true initiates. You recall from a fringe text that her secretive name, Thesmia, carries the power to bind the season's fate. You lean toward a statue, a draped figure clutching a cornucopia, and whisper, Thesmia. The word passes through your lips like silk, dissipating into the hush. Almost immediately, you feel the ground tremble underfoot, a vibration so gentle it might be imagined. But then you see the cornucopia's carved fruits, acorns, pomegranates, grapes quiver as though a ghostly wind rustles them. Whether that tremor was an earthquake reminiscence or divine acknowledgement, you can't say. Historians still argue whether Thesmia appeared in classical inscriptions or was a later invention to deepen mystique. In this grove, however, you don't question it. You nod to Demeter, feeling a frisson of exhilaration. Finally, the goddess instructs you to pour the jar's remaining wine not on marble, but into a small hollow at the base of the olive tree overhead. You pour, and the wine seeps upward, disappearing into a knothole as if the tree itself drinks. First mainstream fact: Greeks often venerated trees by pouring libations at their roots. This fringe variation, pouring upward, symbolizes reversing the cycle of life and death, a secret gesture of rebirth. You squint, wondering if your eyes deceive you. A single drop of wine trails up a slender vine, vanishing into the bark. Demeter's final whisper drapes over you. Now guard these rites in the silence of your heart. The statues around you stand unchanged, their marble ears still. You feel both blessed and burdened, entrusted with secrets that toe the line between benediction and taboo. As you prepare to leave, you glance back at the trio of statues, noting how the serpent motifs glow faintly in the torchlight, and the olive tree's knothole seems to hum with dormant power. You tuck your empty flask into your pack, its backward pouring now a symbol of initiation. The green torch fire returns to gold, mirrored in the setting sun's glow on the grove's marble battalion. The fringe rites may never appear in mainstream textbooks, yet here in this grove they pulse with hidden potency. You step away, the olive-scented breeze swirling around you as though sealing your vow of silence. Behind you, Demeter's marble confidants remain guardians of rituals whispered on the edge of orthodoxy. You cross the boundary again, torch flame steady and normal, and exhale as laughter bubbles up a last joke to seal the evening. You've led a goddess's fringe rites without even spilling your wine, a rare feat of divine hospitality. You nod in salute to the statues, then turn and retrace your steps under the olive tree's rustling leaves, each one echoing soft applause. The grove grows quieter with every step, until only the distant chirp of crickets and the soft sigh of the wind remains. You carry the weight of inverted libations' secret names and green flames in your heart, tokens of a night spent in the company of stone and deity. On the fringe of mysteries most mortals never glimpse, you pause at the heart of the grove as twilight deepens, sinking your fingers into the gravel to steady your breath. All around you, the marble guardian statues of harvest maidens, torch-bearers, and grieving mothers stand in rigid silence. Yet in this hush, you begin to sense something shifting the faintest resonance like a vast choir rehearsing beyond sight. You lean forward, hand planted on a carved knee, and imagine the statues whispering back their cracks, echoing forgotten chants from eras when stone spoke freely under goddess tutelage. A mainstream historical fact surfaces in late classical Greece. Sculptors often included intentional joining cracks in marble statues, so that votive offerings could be concealed within transforming stone figures into crypts of divine presence. You run your thumb along one such fissure, feeling the smooth patina inside, and wonder how many secrets those hollow veins hold. In this grove, those cracks are conduits, not defects. Archaeologists still argue whether such joinery was purely structural or imbued with ritual significance. Here, though, you feel very much that the statues are breathing stories through their fractures. You press your ear against a wide crack near a statue's waist and catch a low, rolling murmur, an unintelligible phrase, but laden with emotion. It's as if the stone itself tries to convey Demeter's grief, retracing every year of drought and abundance in a cyclical chant. You swallow hard, a chill skittering down your spine. A fringe tidbit flitters in your mind. Some local seers insist that during solstices you can hear complete hymns recited by the statues, their tones shaped by the unique mineral composition of each marble slab. Skeptics dismiss such accounts as pareidolia, our tendency to perceive patterns in randomness. But the murmur under your ear feels too deliberate to ignore. You back away slowly, letting the chorus of whispers fade, and circle the statue, studying its expression. Its eyes, carved with exquisite precision during the Hellenistic era, seem to glint in the moonlight, another mainstream note since sculptors of that period first experimented with orbital drill techniques to deepen pupils and create lifelike reflections. Here, though, this technique seems more than aesthetic. It's almost a microphone, capturing and projecting the winds of time. Historians still debate whether these deep-set pupils were purely decorative or served a more mystical purpose. But in this grove, they feel like listening devices tuned to divine frequencies. You move to another statue, one fractured at the shoulder, where Demeter pressed her brow earlier. You squeeze your fingers into the break, feeling the cool marble give slightly under pressure. A soft sigh rolls past your ear, a breath as ancient as the barley beneath your boots. You exhale, matching the rhythm, and feel an uncanny symbiosis. Your heartbeat syncs with the statue's silent pulse. Perhaps you're imagining it, but you've learned that imagination was always essential to true initiation. First joke at this point, you'd pay good drachmas for a statue to invite you for coffee. Second joke, or maybe just a cold beverage, you look sweaty, and even divine bits of marble sweat seep from cracks. Third joke note, to self-stone hydration isn't a thing, so stop fanning the illusion. You wander to a trio of smaller statues clustered at the base of an ancient olive, their carved hands reaching toward each other as if hungry for shared secrets. You crouch among them and whisper back, "What do you know of Persephone's return?" Silence follows, then the soft scrape of stone against stone, a gentle murmur like pages turning in a massive invisible book. Whether this is natural settling or a divine reply, you can't tell, but it sends a thrill through your bones. Iris, the goddess of the rainbow, once bore messages between Demeter and Zeus. You imagine these statues carry similar dispatches, only theirs travel through earth and time. You stand and cross to the largest statue in the cluster, a dignified figure draped in ceremonial garb. You lay a hand on her carved chest and whisper one of your own confessions, "I never learned to kneel at harvest festivals." The marble beneath your palm seems to soften as though offering forgiveness. Fringe tradition holds that confessions whispered to Demeter's stone avatars could absolve minor transgressions if spoken during moonlit hours. Mainstream epigraphists still argue whether graffiti scratched into sacred precincts were true pleas for mercy or mere pranks. But here you feel forgiven. A sudden breeze rustles through the grove, as if the statues themselves draw collective breath. You step back and watch dusted lichen flakes drift from carved shoulders, and pollen from earlier rites swirls around your feet. In that ephemeral cloud, you swear the statue's eyes glint with amusement, like conspirators in an ageless secret. You grin, feeling oddly included. You wander toward a statue kneeling with arms outstretched to the sky, its pose the perfect echo of a child's cry for maternal comfort. You kneel before it, mirroring the gesture, and lay your palms on the cold stone. Your breath clouds in the cool night air as you murmur a question. Is sorrow the price of growth? A deep resonance answers back low and humming, vibrating through your palms into your fingertips. It's not a word, but a feeling, a tidal shift between grief and gratitude that chords through your chest. Historians still argue whether Demeter's mythology emphasizes loss or renewal more. But here you find both fused in marble warmth. You rise slowly, shoulders quivering with the echo of that silent hymn. The statues stand motionless once more, yet you sense their presence behind every carved fold, every chipped corner, every intentional groove. Their silent solidarity bolsters you, as though they silently applaud your courage to listen. You take one last walk in the circle of guardians, placing a palm on each crack you can reach. Each touch elicits a unique hum, some deep as the earth's core, others high and crystalline like frost-shattered bells. You trace a path that feels like mapping a secret network, each statue a node in a sacred web. When you finish, you stand at the grove's edge, surveying the congregation of stone around you. Moonlight filters through olive branches, spotlighting one statue whose face seems to glow with inner light. You step forward and whisper, "Thank you." The hush that follows is profound, complete comforting, as if the grove itself embraces your gratitude. Whether this response is your own pulse echoing or a genuine divine acknowledgement you leave, convinced that stone can indeed speak back when treated as confidant rather than monument. You step back onto the path leading out of the grove, heart pounding in a wild beat that matches the thrumming echoes still suspended in your ears. Behind you, the statues remain as silent guardians of memories and messengers of Demeter's enduring grace. You carry their whispers with you, confidences etched in marble and memory alike. You break away from the circle of listening statues and follow a narrow vine-choked path deeper into the grove, where the undergrowth gives way to an open clearing. At its center stands a solitary statue of Demeter, her posture regal, yet relaxed, one hand extended palm up as if awaiting a gift. Around her feet, a ring of flat stones is arranged in a near-perfect circle, each etched with symbols of earth, wind, fire, and water. You step inside this circle, every footfall echoing like a solemn drumbeat, and sense you're standing at the threshold of her most secret bargain. A mainstream historical fact reminds you that ancient Greeks often made pacts with local demons, earth spirits tied to specific groves, springs, or hills, offering sacrifices in exchange for protection or bounty. But here, in this hallowed ring, you learn of Demeter's own pact. She forged an alliance with these elemental guardians, binding their power to her will to safeguard the fertility of fields across the world. The statue before you embodies this covenant, her marble form both mediator and monument to a contract older than temples. You crouch to examine one of the circle stones tracing the carved sigil of a coiled serpent around a sprouting grain. The serpent, you recall, symbolizes chthonic forces, powers of the underworld that Demeter appeased to ensure souls and seeds alike could return each season. Historians still argue whether snake imagery in Demeter's cult was purely symbolic of rebirth or indicated actual serpent worship practices among her earliest followers. Yet here, you feel the sigil pulse under your fingertips as if alive with slumbering force. Demeter's whisper coils through your mind. This covenant binds life to death, harvest to underworld. You glance up at the statue. Her eyes, carved with uncanny precision, seem to focus on your palm pressed to the earth. You press harder, feeling the stone's chill seep into your bones, and a gentle vibration radiates outward, a heartbeat echoing beneath the surface. A fringe legend surfaces. Some devotees claimed that at the moment of the pact, Demeter poured ambrosia into the earth itself at this very spot, sealing her bond with the subterranean spirits. They said faint traces of honey and nectar still linger beneath the stones, detectable only by those who listened with their hands. You dip a finger into a patch of damp soil at the circle's edge and taste a sweetness on your tongue, subtle, fleeting, like a whispered promise of abundance. You stand and circle the covenant ring, passing your hand across each elemental sigil, a wave cresting in stone, a gust of wind sculpted into a spiral, a flicker of flame captured in curling marble. With each touch, you sense a distinct resonance, watery timbre, airy whistle, crackling warmth. The sequence feels choreographed, like playing a primal instrument, a ritual symphony echoing the fourfold dance of nature. Historians still debate whether such elemental carvings served as teaching aids for initiates, or were purely decorative motifs. In this sacred circle, they feel anything but ornamental. First joke of the section, it's the world's most exclusive elemental music festival. No tickets, no amphitheater, just you and a goddess's to-do list. Second joke, just try tasting ambrosia soil at your next dinner party and see how long people let you stay. Third joke, if this pact had a Yelp review, it would read, 4 stars would haunt Earth again. You pause before the flame sigil. Demeter's whisper instructs light a spark within the circle, but let no flame cross its boundary. You retrieve flint from your pocket, the same stones used for the green flame rite, and strike them together. A single spark leaps to life against dry lichen on the basin's edge, incendiary and bright. You cup your hands and guide the spark to a cluster of wood slivers you prepared earlier, igniting a small bonfire that crackles with fierce warmth. The flame dances within the ring, its light casting living shadows that flicker across the grove. You lower your voice and recite a vow, by earth's deep breath, by wind's free wing, by water's flow, by fire's heart. I stand as guardian of the harvest. Each phrase triggers a response. The ground hums, a soft breeze stirs the leaves overhead, moisture beads on your skin, and the fire's crackle intensifies. Whether this interplay is natural stimulus or divine orchestration, you feel the imprint of the pact pressing gently on your senses. Demeter's statue tilts slightly, a subtle shift that could be your imagination, except you notice the flame's glow brighten on the goddess's carved features as if she acknowledges your vow. You step back and watch the fire dance within the elemental circle, its pillar of flame contained by invisible walls. The tree canopy above rustles in approval, and somewhere in the distance a nightingale trills a lone voice, heralding completion. A fringe note drifts through your thoughts. Some mystery seekers claim that when the pact was renewed yearly at Eleusis, the initiates would each lay a wreath of herbs at Demeter's feet, and those wreaths would sprout roots by dawn, binding season to season. Mainstream botanists still argue whether spontaneous rooting is possible. Here you glance at your shadow and half expect a wreath to sprout at your sandals. You crouch and draw a line in the gravel with your staff marking the circle's boundary. Each element responds. The flame dims respectfully as your line completes the breeze, calms the earth beneath your palm, feels steady. Water forms droplets on a nearby leaf. The covenant remains unbroken, and you sense the grove's anticipation dissolve into a tranquil hush. You rise and approach the statue, placing a branch of olive, an emblem of peace and new beginnings, in Demeter's marble hand. The gesture feels significant, as if you're offering your service as the grove's steward. Demeter's whispered approval brushes your mind. Guard this place, and it will guard the seed of life. You press your palm to the goddess's marble wrist, a pledge sealed in stone and spirit. First mainstream fact olive branches have been symbols of peace and victory since archaic times, and were sacred to several Greek deities. Fringe lore adds that olives from Demeter's grove grant long life to those who consume their oil. Scholars still argue whether olive worship predates Demeter's cult or was later assimilated. But here, as you stand in silent communion, the question seems academic. You extinguish the fire by smothering it with loose soil from the packed circle, feeling the heat dissipate beneath your fingers. The flame's residue fades, leaving only the scent of wood smoke lingering in the air. The elemental carvings remain etched memory stones of a covenant renewed. As you straighten, the shadows deepen, and the moon climbs higher, its silver rays illuminating the circle's sigils. The grove feels alive with potential earth, wind, water, and fire aligned in silent accord. You tuck the flint and your staff away, letting the memory of fire's warmth settle in your chest. You turn to leave, but pause one last time at the circle's edge. You press a finger to the serpent-ingrained sigil, whispering, "May our pact endure." The vine-choked edges of the clearing rustle, as if in response, the boundary between stone and spirit more permeable tonight. You step out of the circle carrying the weight and grace of Demeter's pact with Earth's spirits. Behind you, her statue stands, vigilant marble carving set against the velvet night. The grove exhales around you a promise that what you've learned will remain alive wherever seeds take root. You slip past the elemental circle and follow a shadow-dappled path toward a low stone arch, threaded with ivy, the entrance to a secluded clearing that feels suspended between dusk and night. Lanterns hung from wrought iron hooks rim the arch, though all remain unlit remnants of a forgotten festival or an unkind custom of darkness. You step beneath the arch, the stone's cool curve pressing gently on your shoulders, and enter a grove lit only by moonlight filtering through olive and ash trees. At the center stands a raised platform laid with woven mats and scattered grain husks, as if awaiting an audience for a midnight reap. Demeter's voice, soft and knowing, wraps around you. Behold the vision of the harvest's culmination. You swallow, noting how the hush amplifies even your own breathing. The platform's edge is lined with scattered sheaves of barley, tied in bundles, their golden heads tipped like candles awaiting a spark. A mainstream historical fact in harvest festivals, communities often gathered for communal threshing and celebrations, binding sheaves into bundles as tokens of gratitude. Here, though, the scene feels more ritual than revelry, a ceremonial showcase rather than a communal feast. You step onto the platform, each mat sighing underfoot as the grain husks rustle like soft applause. You circle slowly, sensing the weight of anticipation in the chilled air. Fringe lore suggests that this platform served as a stage for Demeter's midnight harvest vision, a sacred performance where the goddess appeared to chosen initiates to reveal the season's hidden fortunes. Scholars still argue whether such nocturnal assemblies actually occurred or were symbolic fables designed to inspire awe. As you stand before a neatly stacked sheaf, Demeter's whisper guides you, invoke the vision with rhythmic strokes. You grasp the nearest bundle and perform a gentle threshing motion, letting grains rain onto the platform in a shimmering cascade. Each kernel that lands sings on stone a delicate chime that resonates under the moon's glow. You continue the motion hypnotic thresh, release, thresh, release. The rhythm forms a lullaby to earth and sky. First joke, it's the quietest grain dance you've ever performed, and definitely the only one under moonlight. Second joke, neighbors probably think you're sleepwalking with a scythe. Third joke, if this fails, you can always start a midnight oatmeal stand. With each thresh you see phantom images flicker in the hushed shadows. Cottages aflame with hearthlight fields heavy with ripening ears and faces of ancestors watching with gentle smiles. Whether these visions are divine or your mind's conjuring, you feel their warmth enfolding you. Historians still argue whether ancient initiates reported literal visions or metaphorical insights. But here, you sense both truth and dream in a hushed embrace. You gather the freed grains into a shallow bowl carved from olive wood, its surface worn smooth by ages of sacrificial use. Demeter's voice instructs, offer the first fruits to the earth below. You step to the platform's edge and scatter grains onto the mossy ground beneath. The kernels nestle into the earth as though drawn by hidden roots, vanishing almost instantly. A fringe tale holds that these first fruits return as sprouting shoots by dawn's light, a secret boon granted to the faithful. Mainstream agronomists still debate whether such rapid germination is possible. Moonlit dew might coax some kernels, but full shoots overnight. Unlikely yet, you half expect tiny green tips to breach the soil. You turn back to the platform and notice a carved inscription along its base. Only in yielding does life ascend. The phrase is worn but legible. You trace each letter with a fingertip, tasting its promise. Surrendering grain to earth transforms death into life. This paradox pulses beneath your skin, an echo of every harvest's cyclical truth. Demeter's whisper returns, urging you to lie upon the mats and gaze upward. You recline, the cool weave pressing against your back, and watch filaments of moonlight drift through the leaves overhead. You see patterns in the canopy, an ear of grain here, a crescent moon there, images echoed by sculptures in the grove. A mainstream observation, Greek poets often liken constellations to agricultural symbols linking cosmos and crop. Here, the ceiling of leaves becomes a living tapestry, a sky farm for divine contemplation. You close your eyes and let the moon's silver fingers brush your eyelids. A hush settles, and you feel the gentle pulse of earth beneath the platform, as though the grove's heartbeat syncs with your own. Demeter's voice offers a final benediction. Carry this vision into the coming dawn, that life may never forget its promise. The words dissolve into the night, leaving you suspended between sleep and wakefulness. You linger a moment longer, then rise your limbs, humming with the platform's hidden resonance. The sheaves remain stacked silent and waiting, their grain husks soft beneath your touch. You step back through the ivy-threaded arch, pausing to extinguish the silent candles, lanterns that needed no flame to glow in your memory. As you emerge into the moonlit clearing beyond you, feel the midnight harvest vision settle in your bones. The grove's hush gives way to the rustle of leaves and distant cricket song. But within you, the platform's echoes continue, a quiet harvest hymn that promises renewal at first light. You leave the clearing carrying the woven mat's imprint on your shoulders and Demeter's final charge on your lips. Behind you, the statues stand vigil, and the arch's lanterns return to silent watch. In the hush of your departure, you sense the grove's gratitude and a lingering invitation to return when the night calls you home again. You wander back through the moonlit groves, the marble sentinels now draped in silver shadows, and find yourself standing before the grandest statue of them all, a towering figure of Demeter, lifting a cornucopia, brimming with sculpted fruits. Your heartbeat thrums like a distant drum as you realize you're at the threshold of the grove's final echo, the moment when myth and memory collide. Historians still argue whether this statue was crafted in the 4th century BCE or added during Roman restoration centuries later. But here, under the gentle hush of night, such debates feel beautifully irrelevant. The air is thick with night-blooming jasmine and the faint tang of marble warmed by moonlight. You step closer, your boots whispering against the gravel, and lean your palm into one of the cornucopia's carved pomegranates. The seeds beneath your touch rattle softly, as if alive with the weight of every whisper the goddess has ever shared. You swallow remembering Section 9's inverted libations and the secret name Thesmia that made stones tremble. Now you wonder, did those rituals truly shift fate's currents? Or were they simply echoes, shaped by human longing? A mainstream historical fact lodges itself in your mind. Roman-era restorers often repurposed Greek statues, adding Latin inscriptions and slightly altering iconography to suit imperial tastes. You trace faint LVX lettering etched near the statue's base, evidence of a later hand seeking to redirect Demeter's blessings toward emperors and landowners. Yet beneath those letters, the original Greek marble remains pure, a testament to a time when bounty was communal rather than imperial. You crouch and peer into a fissure at the statue's knee, a crack you hadn't noticed before. It's narrow but deep, like the cleft in a ripe pomegranate. You press your ear to it, recalling Section 3's fractured statue, throbbing with ancient resonance. Again, you catch a faint murmur, harvest not sold, and your chest tightens. Is it a divine admonition, or your own restless mind projecting meaning? Skeptics call it pareidolia. But in this grove, skepticism tastes like ash. First joke, your paranoia meter is off the charts. But at least you're attuned to marble frequencies. Second joke, if these statues start tweeting, you'll be their first follower. Third joke, consider this, your crash course in Stone Whispering 101, no textbook required. You rise and circle the statue of Demeter, observing how her face, soft yet resolute, embodies both maternal warmth and unyielding strength. Mainstream scholars still argue whether Demeter's compassion eclipsed her wrath in original myths, or if later poets softened her edges for mortal comfort. Yet here you see both relief in the goddess's gentle smile and steel in the lines of her sculpted brow. You step back to the edge of the clearing where three smaller statues stand in contemplative poses, one with fingers to its lips, another with arms crossed, and a third holding a loaf of bread aloft. They feel like a jury poised to render judgment on your presence here. You address them aloud in a conspiratorial whisper. Did my backwards pouring really confuse fate's judgment? Or was that just Bartholomew from Apollonia showing off? The third statue's loaf clinks against its marble pedestal as if chuckling. A fringed tidbit springs to mind. In late antique folklore, Demeter was said to whisper, fateful prophecies into the ears of sacrificial animals before their offering, and their bleats carried messages to human ears. Whether such rites ever occurred or were colorful allegories, no one knows. You grin at the idea of a profane goat oracle, but can't shake the feeling that hidden patterns flicker behind every marble eye. Modern debate bubbles up. Historians still argue whether the Eleusinian mysteries granted initiates literal glimpses of future twists, or merely symbolized inner transformations toward ethical living. Here, amid the statues, the boundary between prophecy and psychology dissolves like dew under dawn. You can almost sense the electric potential of every whispered secret swirling around you. You take a slow breath, letting the jasmine fragrance fill your lungs, and step beneath a vine-draped arch that leads deeper into the grove. The path narrows, flanked by statues kneeling in supplication. Demeter's soft voice laces through the branches. Fate is not a river, but a weaver's loom, threads interlace. But you choose the pattern. You exhale, recognizing callbacks to your own whispered vows in Section 11's Covenant Circle and Section 7's Name Thrice Invocation. The tapestry of rituals you've woven seems to tighten around your senses. You reach a small basin carved into a pedestal half filled with pale water. Moonlight turns the surface into rippled quicksilver. Demeter instructs, see in the water the echoes of your choices. You bend over and peer in, expecting to see your reflection. Instead, the water's surface shifts, revealing fleeting images, you scattering pollen across marble in Section 8. You igniting a green flame in Section 9. You crouching by thresholds in Section 10. Each vignette dances across the basin, a montage of your steps through the grove. Your stomach clenches. You've become part of the story, inseparable from the myths you chased. You touch the water with a single finger, and the images shatter like glass, scattering into ripples that lap the basin's rim. A faint voice, barely above a sigh, whispers, echo alters course, before fading. You lean back, breathless, pondering whether these water visions truly mapped fate or mirrored your own journey. Historians still argue whether water divination in Greek sanctuaries was widespread or confined to peripheral cults. In this moment, it feels as ancient as Demeter's first secret. You glance up at the grand statue of Demeter, now framed by twisting vines that look like natural ribbons binding goddess to grove. Her cornucopia gleams in the pale light, a symbol both of plenty and of stories stored within each carved grain. You take a step forward, placing both hands atop the rim. The marble is chilled, but a soft warmth sighs through your palms, like the final echoes of every seed, every whisper, every vow. You close your eyes and murmur a final question. Did these echoes alter my fate? The grove holds its breath. For a heartbeat, the only sound is your own pulse. Then, in the distant rustle of leaves, you catch a whisper. You choose. It's neither command nor prophecy, but an invitation, perhaps the truest gift of all. You step away from the basin, lifting your gaze to the sky where stars glimmer like scattered pollen. The statues stand guard around you, their silent verdict unspoken but palpable. You feel both humbled and empowered by the ambiguous echoes that replay within your mind. First joke, fate's longest detour, guided by a goddess, and a gaggle of marble statues. Second joke, and you thought your morning commute was unpredictable. Third joke next time, pack an extra flask, just in case the water visions get thirsty for more show. You take a final circuit of the grove, touching each statue one last time. The fractures, the fissures, the polished surfaces, they all hum with a aligned purpose, now united by your presence and Demeter's murmurs. You pause before the first statue you met at dawn, the one whose carved eyes shed dew-like tears. You place a gentle palm over its face, whispering thanks for its silent confidences. As you step beyond the grove's boundary, the marble forms blur in your vision, merging into a dreamscape of stone and shadow. You exhale, letting the night air fill your lungs. The echoes of Demeter's whispers settle into your bones, a chorus of possibilities that will guide you beyond this sacred place. You drift toward a secluded grove where moonlight filters through a lattice of olive branches, illuminating a circle of fragmented marble, shattered statues, half buried in moss and ivy. Here, the grove's lament lies in each chipped shard, each fallen fragment whispering of unspoken knowledge and ancient laws. You crouch beside a hymn fragment, etched with barley motifs, fingertips tracing the carved grain. It's a mainstream historical fact that many classical statues were deliberately defaced during iconoclastic uprisings, or looted in wars, reducing once proud artworks to fragments scattered across sanctuaries. Yet here, these pieces feel intentionally arranged as though someone curated a memorial for secrets too painful to speak. You lift a small carved hand resting on a stone slab. The palm is smooth, worn by countless touches, and you press your own hand against it. A low hum resonates through the fragment, a sorrow-laden murmur that tightens your chest. Fringe storytellers claim that broken statues inherit the goddess's grief in their fractures, each shard a repository of tears shed for Persephone's abduction. Historians still argue whether statue damage was practical vandalism or ritual killing of effigies to mark the end of festivals. But here you sense purposeful preservation. These fragments are relics, guardians of loss. First joke: you've seen less brokenness in your last breakup. Second joke: at least marble doesn't judge your emotional baggage. Third joke: if only shattered statues could autograph themselves, you'd have one heck of a collector's item. You rise and circle the clearing, stepping lightly among the half-buried torsos and dismembered limbs. A breeze stirs pollen from nearby blossoms, dusting the fragments in golden motes that shimmer like specks of memory. You inhale the aroma of wild thyme and crushed stone, a paradox of living scent and lifeless marble. You pause before a fragment of a statue's face. Only an ear remains curving into silence. You cup it and listen. A brittle crackle emerges, a static laced echo of voices chanting, "Seasons end, stories fade." You exhale, heart thudding. Symbolic or supernatural? You can't decide, though. Scholars still debate whether such acoustic phenomena in broken architecture are accidental or engineered. You pocket a tiny marble bead, once an ornament from a goddess's necklace, perhaps, and stand before a shattered base engraved with a dedication to Demeter from those who wept. The inscription is interrupted by a deep gouge, the letters trailing off into jagged void. You swallow. This tribute feels raw, infused with real grief from anonymous worshippers. Mainstream archaeologists record many votive inscriptions, but few convey such unguarded sorrow. Here, each shard shouts what polished statues cannot. You spot a cluster of fragments arranged like a nest around a small spring. Water seeps from the rock, pooling in a carved depression before spilling into the earth. You kneel and press a hand into the cool flow. The water tastes faintly sweet remnant of honeyed libations poured long ago. Fringe lore says that tears of Demeter mixed with spring water create a potion of memory, recalling past seasons with vivid clarity. Historians still argue whether references to goddess tears in classical texts were poetic metaphors or literal beliefs. But as you drink recollections of every seed rite and whispered vow flood your mind vivid as if relived, you rise wiping water from your lips and gather the marble bead in your palm. You walk to another fragment, a foot carved with meticulous detail, its sole showing wear from ceremonial dances. You press your thumb into the marble's arch and feel a surge of warmth contrast to the fragment's cool surface. It's as if the statue remembers each step taken centuries ago. Mainstream experts note that Hellenistic sculptors created weight-shift poses contrapposto to suggest lifelike movement. Here, that movement feels recorded in stone memory. A soft rustle draws your gaze upward, a lone owl perched on a broken plinth, its wide eyes reflecting your silhouette. You freeze. In Greek folklore, owls symbolize hidden knowledge and the presence of prophetic spirits. This owl regards you for a long moment, then flakes a small white feather onto the marble. You catch it mid-air and tuck it into your journal. First joke suddenly, you're a walking cliché collector of wisdom feathers. Second joke, let's hope it's not an ill-omened omen. Third joke, at least it's free memorabilia. You return to the fragments and carefully lay the feather atop the carved ear. As you do, the murmur beneath the fragment shifts no longer sorrow, but a soft sigh of relief. You step back, heart fluttering. Whether owl's feather or your touch ease the sorrow you can't know. Scholars still argue whether birds near sanctuaries were sacred emissaries or simply opportunistic roosting creatures. Tonight, this owl feels divine. You circle to a cluster of chest fragments, torso pieces with reliefs of wheat and vines entwined. You press both palms onto one, inhaling deep. The grain relief evokes the scent of freshly baked bread. You picture Demeter herself offering sustenance to humankind, her generosity immortalized even in broken stone. A fringe detail surfaces some mystery cults baked bread fragments into statues at festivals, then retrieved and ate them as consecrated morsels. Mainstream historians still debate the veracity of such practices, but the aroma in your nostrils makes you wonder. You gather yourself and kneel before the spring-fed fragment, voice soft, "May your sorrow nourish new growth." You pour a drop of the spring water onto the marble crack. The surface sighs beneath your touch, and an almost imperceptible green tendril of moss unfurls from the fissure. You gasp. Could life emerge from broken stone? Botanists still argue whether moss spores can remain dormant in marble for centuries. Here, a living strand weaves between past and future. You rise, brushing your knees, and take one last look at the shattered tableau. The fragments once discarded or defiled now feel sacred whole in their brokenness. You step among them, careful not to disturb the newfound moss, and exit the circular clearing, carrying the marble bead and owl feather as tokens of lament transformed. First mainstream fact, Greek votive offerings range from pottery shards to precious metals reflecting varying means of worship. Fringe lore shards long forgotten could carry buried prayers waiting for the right ear to listen. As you leave, you feel you've honored those invisible voices, bridging broken pasts to living futures. You pause at the grove's edge, feather and bead in hand, and whisper thanks to the fragments you've healed. The trees rustle overhead, and you swear you hear a chorus of soft sighs, grief-eased secrets shared, and the promise of regeneration echoing in every break. You pause at the grove's outermost circle, where marble columns form a silent colonnade leading back toward the world beyond. The night air is cool and still carrying the faint scent of wild barley and damp stone. Around you, statues stand motionless in their final vigil, each one cradling the secrets you've heard. You feel an electric hush settle, as if the grove itself draws a collective breath in preparation for its long restorative slumber. First joke. It's the world's quietest bathroom break. No flushing, just cosmic stillness. Second joke. If you whisper, the statues might shoosh you. Third joke. Try not to sneeze. Even the dust is sleeping. A mainstream historical fact drifts into your awareness. By the late Roman period, many rural sanctuaries had fallen into disuse as official cults shifted to urban centers, leaving their sculptures to wither in lonely fields. Yet here, in this hidden grove, the statues endure as guardians of an older, quieter magic. Their persistence echoes humanity's own drive to remember and to mourn. You step forward and place a hand on the nearest statue's polished arm. Its marble surface is smooth beneath your palm, the warmth a gentle reminder of every human touch that shaped it. You think back to Section 1's dawn murmurs, Section 3's fractured heart, Section 9's green flame, Section 14's moss-born promise. Each moment has led you here to this final act of reverence. A fringed tidbit surfaces. Some local storytellers swear that on the winter solstice, Demeter's shadows stretch from statue to statue, knitting a silent procession that carries echoes of lost initiates back into the grove. Scholars still argue whether such folklore developed from genuine ritual or as poetic invention by 19th century romantics. Tonight, though, you sense those shadows aligning as if a secret choreography whispers just beyond sight. You step between two statues of maidens whose heads tilt toward each other in perpetual conversation. You smile, imagining their whispered deliberations, perhaps debating which fragment of sorrow to share next, or whether to tease you for your backward libations. You whisper farewell, my stony friends, and the gravel underfoot echoes softly, a low, appreciative murmur that could be your footsteps or the grove's own applause. Mainstream historians note that many votive statues bore inscriptions indicating their dedicators' names and prayers. Yet here, not one has identifying words, anonymity that transforms each sculpted figure into a universal confidant. You brush the hem of one statue's carved robe and feel the grooves hum beneath your finger as though holding the resonance of every prayer ever offered. You move on to a statue in deep relief, depicting Demeter, with arms outstretched, palm scars from chisel marks visible in its marble grain. You press your palm to its palm and let your fingers trace the subtle indentations. A low sigh drifts through the grove, so soft you almost dismiss it as wind. But then the silence deepens, and in that depth you feel a pinpoint of warmth settle on your skin, an almost lingering trace of the goddess's final whisper. Historians still argue whether the phrase inscribed at Eleusis May, no uninitiated soul, hear these words, was ever spoken aloud, or served purely as a metaphor for sacred inaccessibility. Here you borne witness to every word, every breath, and yet the hush at your fingertips feels holier than any spoken oath. First joke of the section. If this hush had a volume knob, it'd be set to absolute 0. Second joke. I hope your phone's on silent, or better yet, powered off. Third joke. Let's leave the groves to the statues. They haven't asked for any Wi-Fi. You take a final walk through the colonnade, pausing at each statue's outstretched hand to leave a silent thank you, a nod to their patience and their sorrow. You press your palm firmly onto marble as though sealing a pact of gratitude. Each touch sends a tiny pulse through your veins, a whispered echo that binds you to this place. Your boots carry you back across the threshold where statue and forest meet. You turn once more to glimpse the moonlit grove, ivory forms gleaming among shadowy trunks, each one a sentinel guarding memory itself. The grove seems to exhale its final hush, drifting toward you on silvered air. You lift your face to the sky stars glimmering like scattered pollen in the heavens. You close your eyes, remembering the first dewdrop at dawn, the cracks hum, the triumph of fire and water, the song of stone and the sigh of moss. All these echoes now rest within you, woven into the marrow of your bones. As you step away, you feel the last whisper brush your cheek, cool as marble, soft as breath. It fades instantly, leaving you alone on the path. Behind you, the statues revert to stony stillness, their eternal vigil resumed until the next seeker dares to listen. Slow wind down. The grove's hush settles deeper as you walk beneath moon-touched branches, each step lighter than the last. Your breathing slows, measured by the night's gentle cadence. Leaves murmur overhead, and your ears, now attuned to silence, catch the distant drip of dew from marble edges like a lullaby composed in stone. Memories unfurl in your mind, whispers at dawn, fractured hearts, secret seed rites, terraces singing beneath your steps, torch-lit shadows, pollen blessings, elemental bonds, midnight visions, inverted libations, murmuring cracks, and the mosaic of water reflections. Each recollection drifts softly, a feather-light breeze weaving through your thoughts. Feel the cool air brush your skin. Every inhalation carries the scent of barley and thyme, the subtle perfume of marble warmed by moonlight. Exhale any lingering tension, let it release like a prayer whispered into the hush. Your muscles slacken your heartbeat, steadying to a tranquil rhythm. Imagine the statues standing silent behind you, guardians of 1,000 secrets now entrusted to your care, They do not demand repayment, only respect, only gentle remembrance. Carry their hush within you, a quiet ember whose glow need never burn bright to remain alive. As you approach the grove's final arch, the threshold between world and myth, you sense the weight of divine sorrow lifted, replaced by a serene promise. Renewal follows rest. Whispers precede song, and seeds buried in darkness will one day bloom in sunlit fields. Now, as the cool path guides you back to waking reality, feel your eyelids grow heavy, lulled by echoes of stone and story. Let your mind drift on the final current of Demeter's voice, soft, comforting, and ever present in the silence you carry. Sweet dreams. Good night.